Hi everyone, this is Elena of the Witches Box, and I'm here today with another episode of Witch Booktube, and today's book of Blood and Bones by Kate Freuler. And I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing her last name correctly. Freuler. This book is so good. I can't even talk about it, but I'm going to. So, of Blood and Bones, working with shadow magics of the dark moon. This is such a good book. I chose this book for our April book subscription box. We are having our live gathering for this book this evening. It is so good. I honestly don't even know where to start. So let me just start with the bio. I'm going to go into the table of contents, and then we're just going to go into this. Kate Freuler has been practicing witchcraft for over 25 years. She has written for Llewellyn's Magical Almanac, Sabbath's Almanac, and Spell a Day Almanac. Kate owns and operates an online store called White Moon Witchcraft. She lives near Toronto. You can visit her online at www.whitemoonwitchcraft.com. Let me read you now the table of content, and then we're going to go from there. Part 1 is Shadow Work and the Dark Moon Current. And in that section, we've got Dark Moon Current and Liminal Spaces, Deities and the Dark Moon Craft and Basics, Dark Moon Divination. Part 2 is Blood and Bones, Blood and Other Fluids, Animal and Their Parts, Bones and Skulls. Part 3, The Forbidden Craft, A Witch's Curio, The Poppet, Cursing and Other Magical Manipulations, Sacrifice. Part 4 is Looking Death and Rebirth in the Face, Death and Death Rites, Working with the Dead, and Rebirth. I'm trying to think of what is the best way to start talking about this. I have a lot to say. I want to read a quote from the book, and I'm probably going to read a couple more. We'll see how we go. This is in the introduction of the book. To be truly connected to nature, the seasons, and the cycles of life, we must be balanced. We must acknowledge, accept, and embrace the darkness of our spirits and experiences as fully as the light parts. This doesn't mean that we should indulge in negativity and harmful behavior, but rather accept these traits as guides and teachers in our personal growth. From there, we can transform our lives. This is addressing the whole notion of working with the dark side. I have such a big issue with how we're still using the word dark when it comes to magic. She addresses some of that here. The rest of what I'm going to say is just me expounding on it. But one of my quotes that I've got floating around out there is that I work in light and darkness, and none of those things, either of those things, have anything to do with good or bad. And we need to, as mature witches, start extricating that meaning from the word dark. It's not bad. It's different. It's an energetic stream that is in a different place. There is power in occlusion. There is power in things that are mysterious and aren't quite clear to see. And also that applies to things like anger and grief and sadness and sorrow and all of those things that are about the human experience that we title as negative. It's human. It's life. It's natural and common. And so that's a whole other conversation. She definitely addresses some of this in the book, but that is me giving you opinion on. There is such an aversion to, I don't do the dark work. What do you even do you even know what you're talking about? You probably don't, right? We need to really get more mature about what we label as dark and what we don't, and change that so that it's not about dark is bad, we don't do bad things. That is a knee-jerk reaction of an immature person, and we need to stop with that. Okay, so there's that. This book covers, as I've already talked about, the table of contents, things that are taboo, things that we don't talk about, like using body fluids for our magic. She talks about working with the shadow and addressing those things about ourselves that we are in constant denial and aversion and defense against. Understand that the things that you are in aversion to, the things that you are disgusted by that are part of you, fragment you, disempower you. Because if it's part of you and you are in active defense against it, you are in active disgust about it, you are in active denial of it, you are cutting yourself off from a part of yourself, and it disempowers you in many, many, many ways. So this book talks about, in a really beautiful way, she did such a good job of addressing the uses of things like blood and bones and different body parts of animals, sexual fluids, both historically and how they've been used in the past, because we need to understand what our people have done and how they used to work, but also in the way that these things can be worked with today, safely, responsibly, in a healthy way. She kind of traversed those things in a really graceful, beautiful way that didn't shy away from the realities and the truth, but also wasn't sensationalistic and wasn't, kind of catering to the potential wow factor or scandal factor of talking about these things, which Again, this book is a 5 for me. It's an amazing piece of work. I think that it's very needed. It's a conversation that we need to have more. And she just handled all those topics in a really beautiful, graceful way, and still very powerful. It packed a punch for me, because this is one of the books where, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I get bored or frustrated with books that offer up a ton of spells without context, or just give you spell after spell after spell without a whole lot there in terms of its gravitas. The spells in this book pack a punch. They're powerful. You get, at least I got, a sense of the energetic behind it in a way that I'm like, this works. This is powerful. This makes sense. These are spells that, for better or for worse, you can use. There is discussion about using these spells in a way that's responsible. There is a discussion about ethics. There is a discussion about maturity, even though I don't remember if she addresses it in terms of maturity, but whenever we're talking about cursing someone, beyond the, oh, that's bad, but the idea that the more mature you become in your spiritual walk, the less inclined you're going to be to want to curse someone out of reaction. You're going to understand the energetics about the situation in a way in which it's probably going to make more sense for you to release it, to bind it, to cut yourself away from it, right? There are different ways energetically to work with something in an effective way that isn't the knee-jerk reaction to hurt because you've been hurt. That doesn't work, not just because it's bad. I don't even think it's bad. I think it's immature, because you're not understanding the dynamics at play. You're not understanding what created the dynamic to begin with, and you're not addressing the dynamic root cause, right? So oftentimes cursing is nothing but a reaction and has nothing to do with making a solution or creating a solution. So she doesn't say that in those words here, but there is an addressing of, you're probably better off doing a different type of spell for something than revenge because of this, this, and this, and this. And she gives you an energetic understanding and context for why you would do that. This book is fantastic. It talks about things that we're uncomfortable with. It talks about using blood for magic in a responsible way. She talks about using sexual fluids, bodily fluids, for magic, and how it's been used in the past and how we can use it today and why. It's uncomfortable stuff. Using bones, and all of it in really respectful, responsible manners, and also addressing the fact that those of us who walk around with aversion to these things keep forgetting that death and decay are just as valuable and sacred a part and beautiful a part of life as life is. And that's another way that we divide things like light and dark. Dark is about death. Dark is about decay. Those are not bad things. Those are a beautiful part of the entire cycle of life. It's nature. And if we're going to be witches and we're going to connect with these parts of existence, as we are part of the natural life cycle, we are part of the circle of life, we're part of the food chain, that is sacred. And so when we walk around in aversion to, in defense of, and in denial of these things that are a natural part of life, we are cutting ourselves off from a whole section of life and existence and nature and ourselves. That can create a lot of personal dysfunction. It can also create a lot of disempowerment energetically in the way we create and manifest in life. Those things are all connected. This book talks about so much of that. It's such a good book. I have not seen another book do this in this way. I haven't been this excited about a book in a very long time. She does an amazing job. I'm going to say a couple of things more. This isn't to say that if you are a witch and you decide that you're not going to work with blood or bones or animal parts or anything of this nature, that you're somehow not a good witch, or that somehow you're not a powerful witch, or that somehow you're not a mature spiritual person. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that when we are in aversion to something actively, when we are in disgust of something actively, when we are in denial of something actively, that's when we disempower ourselves. It's very different to understand something, to learn about it, and then make choices about what makes most sense for you. That's very different than an active, like, oh God, no, oh, it. Do you know what I'm saying? Those are very different things. One is very mature. It's a very conscious, responsible choice. The other one is just being in reaction without really consciously understanding why. Books like this can bring up a lot of questions about where you sit with this. And those are great questions to ask yourself because you learn more. But also, if you read a book like this and you stick with it past the aversion, past the discomfort, you grow. You understand yourself more. You empower yourself by understanding both our history and also ways in which things of nature, even if they're uncomfortable and decaying and dead, still hold a tremendous amount of power. This is an important thing to understand and learn. It raises your level of respect, it raises your level of consciousness, and it broadens the field in terms of your own personal wisdom about what we are as witches and what's available in life, in the entire cycle of what life is. And that includes death and decay and all the things that we cast off when we die, basically. So it's a lot. This book is a lot, but I found it to be thrilling because of the implications and the things that I learned and I remembered and I realized. There are a couple of spells here that are very much about using bodily fluids in a way that just amplifies the power of manifestation for transformation, for personal healing. I mean, I believe that this is her first book out the gate. She's, as the bio says, Kay has written for a couple of almanacs, but this is like the first book to her credit. If this is her first book, my God, I can't wait to see what happens next. No pressure, girl. But this was gorgeously, responsibly, educatedly, another made-up word, done. It's gorgeous. I highly recommend it. It's a 5. I can't wait till we do our live tonight and talk about this in our group, because it's challenging, because it really makes you think, because it forces you to ask yourself questions. And for me, that is really part of the integral work of a witch. Keep learning, keep challenging yourself, keep stretching yourself, keep breaking past these taboos that make every single part of life somehow bad. Stop it. Listen. Get it. Get it. There's a link below. It's really beautifully done in a way that I don't know that it could have been done any better. Honestly, it's that good. So, Of Blood and Bones by Kate Freuler. Get it. And then if you've read it and you have thoughts, I want to hear about it down below. Let's talk about this. I'm sure that a lot of you are going to be a little offended by this book, and that's okay too. I encourage offense because I think that it's a way for us to ask ourselves why. Why are we having such a strong reaction to something? And what does that say about me? And what does that mean? And what do I want it to say or mean about me? These are important questions. The more we understand ourselves, the more we learn ourselves, the better we're going to be, the more empowered we're going to be, the more enriched we're going to be, and the more we're going to be able to contribute to our witchcraft community. So all of those things, this book, I will see you next week on here with another book. And please, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Let's talk about it. If you've read this book especially, and if you're doing some of the work, and if you've done some of the work, I'd love to hear about it. All right. Take care. Bye.